It looks like we're live. Sorry, everybody. We're having some technical difficulties again. Say Facebook decided to be temperamental today. Um,
Just love technology.
oh my gosh. It is the best when it works. As everyone knows, it is the best when it works. And when it doesn't, you're just like, I don't know what
My
to
life is
do.
falling apart.
Yeah, I know, pretty much, pretty much. But welcome everyone to Living in the Texas Hill Country. Thanks for joining us for episode 15. Um, so today we have Bill with us. So he is what's your like official like title? So he works for you're in Extension,
Yes, yeah.
AgriLife Extension.
Yeah, I'm in AgriLife Extension, and my official title is Livestock Guardian Dog Program Specialist. I originally started out as a research specialist on the research side, and then have kind of transitioned over to Extension as the program's kind of grown and changed over the last few years.
And you have like a fairly prestigious title because you're the only one in the state, correct? Am I wrong?
Yes. So
Okay.
I am the only one in the state, and even, more, I don't know if it's really prestigious or not, but even more than that, I'm the only one in the country.
I was gonna ask, are
Um,
you the only one in the nation?
yes, I am the only one in the nation. The only place that actually has a similar, like, on the applied research side of what I do, the only other location that does anything like what we do, the bonding and the training process, is actually the Cheetah Conservation Fund over in Namibia, Africa.
Oh, okay.
So they have a very similar program where they actually breed the dogs there, bond them, train them, and then send them out to producers there to protect livestock, from the cheetahs, and which kind of in turn protects the cheetahs because then the farmers aren't shooting the cheetahs and so on and
Right.
so forth. But
So
yeah,
very, very small world that you're in. Very
it
small.
is. Yes, it's a very small world. Yep, for sure.
Well, I guess we'll start off with like just very basic, like what is a livestock guardian dog? And then why is this something that people that own livestock, why is it a potential tool for them to use?
Okay. Um, So not to get too far into the weeds, but livestock guardian dogs are a distinct type of dog. Just like we have hunting dogs, we have herding dogs, um, we have livestock guardian dogs, and so they are a specific, type of breed of dogs. Um, like all, most breeds that we have today, they were originally developed by the Romans back thousands of years ago. And so they were a combination of several different breeds. Probably the one that's kind of still sort of known is the sight hound. And so, for instance, like the Akbosh breed pulls a lot of that sight hound breed into their makeup. They're kind of tall, lanky, more of a little pointed nose than some of your other guard dog breeds. The main thing that makes livestock guardian dogs different, however, than all the other types of dogs that are out there, is they've been bred not to have prey drive instincts, which are instincts that are in natural wild canines like wolves or coyotes. And so, over time, we have, as humans, when we domesticated dogs, we've increased and decreased some of those traits to get dogs to do what we need them to do. So, for instance, there's a whole series of these traits, but like with a border collie, for instance, they're a herding dog, and so they orient, they eye, they stalk, they chase. They're not supposed to grab, but sometimes they'll grab and bite. And on a wild canine, it goes down to killing and then consuming. Well, for livestock guardian dogs, their behavior patterns are supposed to stop at the orient phase, which is the very first one in that string of behaviors. And so that's where producers get in trouble a lot of times is because they'll want to try to get a dual purpose dog that protects the livestock but herds them as well, so they don't have to have two different dogs and feed dogs and all that. But as soon as they do that, now they introduce prey drive instincts that the border collie has, for instance, into a dog that is not supposed to have those. And then, I get calls from producers like, well, my guardian dog is like 4 years old and it's killing all my lambs, or it, is chasing my lambs all the time, or, whatever it's doing. And that's because it has those prey drive instincts that it's not supposed to have. And that creates a bunch of problems a lot of times.
No,
So
I had never thought about it from like the behavior side of things of like, yeah, livestock guarding dogs are there to guard versus like you said, herding dogs, like it is that driving instinct of the borderline of like I hate to say killing, but yeah, it's the herding them to a location in their wild counterpart would be to obviously kill and consume, but they stop at
yes,
the kill and consume part and drive them
yes.
into like, a pen or whatever. So that's super cool. Sorry. Continue, Bill.
No, no. And so, that's some of the struggles that producers have as well, though, with a guardian dog is because they might have had some type of hunting dog or herding dog. And sure, you can train them to do all these things. Well, because guardian dogs don't have those instincts, a lot of times they don't take to training like other dogs do. They can be very stubborn. They prefer status quo. They don't like a lot of change in their environment. And so, for somebody like me that's looking at bonding and training dogs and how to get we need them to do, can make your life very difficult sometimes and very frustrating. So that's all part of how things go with livestock guarding dogs, and you kind of need to know that, ahead of time going into it. You're not going to be able to train them to sit and lay down and, keep it super basic. Stay, come, no, and you'll if you can do those three things, like, hey, you're doing really well with a livestock guardian dog because they are really bred to be fairly independent of human um, commands and need and things like that. I mean, they should be well socialized, and you should be able to catch your guardian dog. So, and that's another issue that I work with producers on a lot. But um, that's kind of what makes up a livestock guardian dog. And there's roughly, oh, I don't know, there's like 40 plus breeds. Other ones are like, well, there's about 35. I guess from my research and everything, I'd say there's probably about 35 breeds that are, definite livestock guardian dogs. And then there's maybe another 5 or 10 that they might be guardian dogs, but they might be more of a property guardian or overall kind of ranch farm type of dog. They're not really a livestock guardian dog.
Gotcha. So what are some common, so you said of those like 35, what are some really common ones that are found here in Texas?
Sure. So there's predominantly like, probably four that are super common. Great Pyrenees, which is a long-haired breed from France. You have Maremas, which are a long-haired breed from Italy. Then Akbash, which are a short-haired breed from Turkey. And then Anatolian Shepherds, which people like to claim are from Turkey, but it's really an American breed.
Really?
There's kind of a whole story about Anatolian Shepherds, and we probably don't have time to get into that today. But um, like in Turkey, there's no such breed as an Anatolian Shepherd. There's Kangals, there's Akbash, there's a couple others. An Anatolian Shepherd is really a combination of three or four of those breeds from Turkey that a U.S. soldier back in the late 60s, early 70s kind of combined and called them an Anatolian Shepherd and then brought them over to the U.S.
Gotcha.
Um, so they really are like a combination, and that's why in that particular breed there's such a variation in colors and things like that because they're really a mix of a bunch of different breeds from Turkey.
I always kind of wondered, like that was going to be one of my questions is there like an American livestock guarding dog? And I mean, you pretty well just answered that is yeah, Anatolian Shepherds, technically speaking, are American, even
Yeah,
though it's
yeah.
called an alien Anatolian Shepherd. Um,
And so
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so those are your like probably four most common breeds that like you see all the time. There's a couple other breeds that are still like out there and used, and those would be Kangals, which is a breed from Turkey, part of Anatolian Shepherds. Um, Producers kind of in the western part of the state that have issues with like mountain lions, they really like them because they're a bigger dog, can be
Mhm.
more aggressive. Um, Oh, Karakachans are kind of an up and coming breed.
Ooh,
They're a breed from Bulgaria. I really like those dogs personally. Um, but they're a breed from Bulgaria. They've been here about 15 years in the US, and there's several
So
breeders here in
so
Texas.
by dog standards, like relatively new
Yes,
to the
yeah,
United States.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
gosh, I would not even know how to like spell that, to be
You know,
honest.
I just did a Google search, livestock guardian dog breeds, and so I'm like finding them. I'm like, how do you know how to say all that? But I guess you do this all the time. So,
Yeah, I know.
it's
And
also interesting. They all look pretty similar to each other, or as far as the ones that you're mentioning. So that's kind of interesting to me.
yeah, the third one, and this one's kind of not as popular as it used to be, but it's called the Commodore, and it's from Hungary, and it looks completely different than all the rest. It's like a wire-haired breed, and so
Yeah.
it almost looks like a giant poodle, basically. And their hair
Oh,
forms these big like
the
dreadlocks, and
dreadlocks. Yeah.
yes,
The
Okay,
yep,
I
mom's
didn't
dog
yeah,
on the show, on the dog show channel.
I
yeah.
didn't know that they were livestock guardian dogs. I thought like that the hair does not seem conducive to necessarily being like a livestock guardian dog because like you said, there, a lot of times they need to be independent and that hair does not seem like it would make them independent. They would be they would rely upon humans to help them with
They're
their
group.
styling.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, the main reason I spoke to the breeder who we had gotten some for the bonding project from, and I was like, man, what's the deal with this like hair coat, you know? And anyway, long story short, that the reason they were developed that way in Hungary was because the hair because it forms those big mats,
Mhm.
and it was actually like plates of armor is what they kind of called it. And it would protect the dog from injuries from wolves or bears in Europe because the hair would get so matted that you almost couldn't like stab a knife through it. And so it would really protect the dog from being injured on its sides of its
Hmm,
body and stuff when it got into a fight with a large predator. And that was the intent of that hair coat.
interesting.
That is really interesting.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, but it's just one of those where it's just I don't know. You learn something new every day, for
Okay.
sure. Um, so okay, so you've mentioned the word bonding process. So what do you mean by bonding process?
Okay, so this is probably the part there's really two parts where everybody kind of messes up with their guardian dogs. And for those of you out there, like this is your first dog, like don't sweat it. Everybody makes mistakes with their first dog, their first guardian dog. So like just chalk it up to experience and do better with your second one. Um, so with that said, the bonding portion. So the bonding process starts roughly at about 5 weeks of age and ends 14 to 16 weeks, kind of depending on which researcher you talk to and journal article you read. I lean more towards the 14-week side. And so that's why it's really important that when a producer finds a guardian dog puppy and they go to buy one from somebody, um, that puppy was raised from close to birth or at birth, with close contact to sheep and goats, for instance, or if it's cattle or pigs or whatever they're wanting the dog to protect. So um, that it's not a very long period of time in that puppy's brain development process from 5 to 14 weeks. And so during that time, it's really critical that that puppy is in as close of contact with sheep or goats, for instance, as possible. Because if they're not, um, that period of time when that bonding or imprinting happens, if they're in the house all the time, for instance, they're not forming that bond with livestock. And so they're forming a bond with people then. And so when you put that dog out with livestock, it's not going to want to stay there. It's going to be looking for humans because that's what it formed an attachment to, during that brain development time. So that's basically what bonding is. And, the project that we've been doing at the center in San Angelo for the last 5 years, I guess that's kind of wrapped up at this point. But we would get 8-week-old puppies. We would put them into a bonding pen, which is a small pen with some sheep and goats, and, you know, make sure that they're getting bonded correctly. They're in close enough contact. And we were doing some training, like leash training and tether training and some things like that. to see if we could, decrease the chance of that puppy as an adult from roaming. And roaming is one of the biggest reasons that guard dogs end up dead and they end up in shelters and things like that because they leave their livestock because they don't have a proper bond from that early age. And
Mhm.
so they go wandering the countryside. And when they're wandering the countryside, they get hit by cars and shot by hunters and trapped and poisoned and disappear in the Texas countryside. All kinds of bad things happen to guard dogs that leave their home ranch. And so the two things that we kind of looked at in that bonding process, and this came directly from producer interviews that I did, was looking at bonding single dogs with livestock versus pairs, and then also a treatment of hot wire in the bonding pens versus no hot wire. And so basically what we found is, the dogs that were bonded and trained in a pen with hot wire, you know, drastically roam less as adults than dogs that weren't bonded in hot wire. Now, the single versus pair portion of it, I don't know. I guess that's still kind of up in the air some. The single dog definitely has a stronger bond to the livestock, and the pair definitely has a stronger bond to each other. However, when um, there's a simulated threat to the single dogs versus the pair, okay, that single dog tends to stay with the herd, okay, while the pair of dogs tends to challenge that threat. And I think they're more apt to challenge it because they have a partner to back them up in the fight.
Mhm.
And so, producers continue to ask me like, well, should I bond singly or, as a pair? I'm like, yeah, really, I just need to be able to do some more research. I don't have a definite answer. Like I said, if you want the strongest bond, yes, do it singly. But if you're short on dogs and you need to do it quickly, bond them as a pair. If you need those dogs out, actively patrolling more, they're probably going to do that more as a pair versus that single dog. And so on that part of it so far it kind of depends on what a producer needs,
Yeah.
whether to single or pair bond. But the hot wire definitely works. Like I said, kind of on average, dogs that are hot wire trained will, and there is a difference between roaming and patrolling, and that's something that we found out in this project. So dogs that are hot wire trained on average will patrol outside their pasture boundary about once a month versus dogs that aren't bonded in hot wire are leaving their livestock 4 or 5 times a week, traveling 4 or 5 miles away, and then a lot of times not returning. Like
Mm.
I have to go track them down on somebody's ranch somewhere, or one of my student workers does, or something like that. And so, um, it makes a big difference. The hot wire. I strongly recommend that to all producers that are getting guard dogs to bond and train them in a pen with hot wire.
I mean, it's the same with people. It's like you touch a hot wire one time, you're like, I got the memo. It does not feel good. We're just not gonna do this again. And especially
Yep.
when they're a puppy, I'm sure it's um it's just an experience that they don't ever forget. So they're just like, I'm just not gonna mess with this
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. For sure. Um, one thing I'll do real quick is let me find because I'm sure somebody's going to be like, well, what does your bonding pen look like?
Yeah.
Um, So let me pull up a picture. Um, I've got it. There it is.
And so
All
I'm
right.
assuming you constantly pretty well have like a rotation of puppies coming through your program.
Yes, we generally do. Are you able to see
Yes.
that shared? Okay. So yes, one thing I do want to tell folks that are out there because I'll start getting a million calls for dogs. This really is a one-man show with a single student worker most of the time. Okay, so we only have facilities to bond and train so many dogs at a time,
Okay.
and it's roughly about 6 each year. We have 4 of these pens that you see on the screen here, and so, like I said, we're bonding a single dog in 2 of these pens and a pair of dogs in the other 2 pens. But these pens are nothing special. I mean, you can see here on the screen, it's just some woven wire, pipe posts, um, There's a porta hut shelter for the livestock and the animals. Um, the thing that's a little farther away in the picture is a feeding station for the puppies, which kind of doubles as a safe space for them to get into if they're being bullied by any of the animals. And you can't really see it in this picture because of the brush had grown up in this photo, but kind of behind these mesquites is a smaller pen. The one that you see on the picture is about 1 acre in size, but within that is roughly a 60 by 60 pen that the puppies start out in for the first month. And then when the puppies are 3 months old, they go into the 1 acre pen and they stay there until they're 6 months old. And then after that, we pull them and their animals out, and they go into a training pasture until they're about 10 months old. So, one of the biggest things, like with our bonding, because people, always ask, like, well, how come y'all don't have all these like adolescent issues that everybody else does? Well, for a couple reasons. One, our puppies are constantly going from they start out with a small pen, and then they go into this 1 acre pen, and then they go out to a training pasture, and then eventually they go out to a cooperating producer. And so the pen sizes are constantly changing. We're rotating the livestock so that they bond to a species or multiple species instead of specific animals. And so when we're changing those animals, and those puppies have to get used to a new animal, and so they can't start, chasing an animal because that animal may turn around and just like plow them into the ground. And so they learn to be submissive to the animals and not chase them or chew off their tails or ears or things like that. And so, the biggest thing I would tell producers is don't so much get hung up on like the sizes that I just went over. It's more the process. So start in a small pen with a few animals, move to a bigger pen with some more animals, move to like a water lot or a small trap or something, and then eventually, out to your bigger pastures.
It's just that constant change, whether it's the animals or the size of the pen or whatever. They don't have time to necessarily, I hate to say get bored, but start to think about things, and like any kid, like get themselves into trouble because they kind of get bored, for lack of a better word,
Yes,
I
that
guess.
you are 100% right. That's exactly, why I don't think we have a lot of those issues because, sometimes people will keep their guard dog puppy until it's 6 or 7 months old, like in that small 60 by 60 pen. And so, when they let them out, yeah, they're like little terrors because they've got all this pent up puppy energy and they can freedom to roam around and, run and all explore things. And so, yeah, they get into trouble when they're stuck in the same spot all the time with the same animals. And so, yeah, change is good. They don't like change, but it's good for that behavior process.
Gotcha. And I realize it's one of those things, we're trying to cram a lot of stuff into a very short amount of time. But so for a lot of this stuff that with the bonding process, this is some stuff I'm assuming you have stuff on. I know you have a website. I'm assuming there's like literature out there that people could go and read about some of the stuff that we've just talked about a little bit more in depth.
Sure. Yeah, I have a fact sheet on our website there at the center in San Angelo on how to pick out a puppy. Everybody loves that one. There's another
Yeah.
one that goes in depth on the bonding and training process. I've got them on feeding, on grooming. There's all kinds of stuff on our website at the center. Yeah.
And
Um,
we'll put that in our comment section so y'all can go and check that out. I know I've checked it out in the past and there's just a ton of information. And this is something that y'all are even constantly continuing to do research. You had already mentioned about, doing a bonded pair versus a single pair or single that you're doing research on constantly. So I guess so we had talked about breeds a little bit. Can you just like run us through a little bit of like some like pros and cons that you've kind of seen of like the four different common breeds that you
sure.
mentioned?
Yeah. So, and this is one thing that I've kind of again figured out like through this research project that we've been doing for the last 6 years now. Um, there are breed tendencies with livestock guardian dogs, just like with all, that's why we have like in hunting dogs, we have pointers and we have flushers and we have retrievers.
And
Okay.
everyone has their favorite people, like hunters like swear by like I am a GSP person, or I like my Britneys, like, and they
Yep.
swear by them and they won't not say they won't refuse to hunt behind other dogs, but they're the best. Like
Yeah.
GSPs or Brittany, they're the best.
Yep.
Anyway, go ahead,
Um,
Bill.
no. So, one thing that we've seen in this bonding project, and the research from it is that and I don't know why producers do this, and I don't know why breeders do this, but there's a lot of crossbreeding with guard dogs. Okay. And so when you do that, the outcome is extremely variable. And a lot of times we're not getting the best of all of those two or maybe three breeds that are in that cross. A lot of times we're getting the worst of those. And so my recommendation first is to stay with purebred dogs at this point. Do not get a crossbred guard dog. I know sometimes like you just need a dog and that's all that's available, and that's fine. But just know if you need them to do a specific job and you have a crossbred dog, it's probably not going to do the job you need it to do. It may, you might just luck out, but probably not. So, um, let's look at like your perimeter dogs. So, in general, and again, these are just tendencies. Okay, if you get a Great Pyrenees, for instance, it may not be a perimeter dog, but that's its breed tendency. Okay, so for instance, Great Pyrenees tend to like large territories. Okay, they tend to be a perimeter dog, and they tend to bark more than other breeds. Okay, because that's how that breed was developed in France. They went from summer to winter, like feeding grounds. There were no fences. The dogs were just left out there, and they barked to tell predators, "Hey, this is my territory." Again, tend to be a perimeter dog. They tend to like large territories because, again, in Turkey, those breeds that make up the Anatolian Shepherd went from summer to winter feeding grounds, and there were no fences and they weren't penned up at night or anything like that. And so the dogs needed to have a large territory to keep predators away from their herds of sheep and goats. Your Maremas, for instance, they have the tendency to be a very close proximity breed. So, because when how that in Italy, they took the dogs out in the morning, they went to feeding grounds, and then the herders came back at night, rounded up everything, penned them up at night in town, and then let the dogs out. So you can imagine if you had a bunch of animals and guard dogs that were close to the house at night, they didn't want those dogs barking because then it kept them up. Okay. And so dogs that barked were gotten rid of and they were, out of the gene pool.
Mhm.
Um, so with your common four, so that brings us now to like Akbash, a great breed. It's probably, one of my top three, or it's definitely in my top three guard dog breeds, that I like, but they tend to be a floater dog. Again, this is just a tendency. It's not a guarantee, but what I see based on GPS tracker data, because all of our dogs get trackers, when they go out. But the Akbash tend to float. So they'll be with the herd sometimes and they'll be out on the perimeter and they'll kind of go back and forth. They also tend to be canine aggressive. So, if you've got a small to say maybe medium-sized place and you're close to town where you're going to get town dogs coming, hey, Akbash are great dogs for that because they'll be with the herd, they'll be out on the perimeter. If some random town dog comes in to try to, chase your sheep or goats, they're going to go after them. Where like Great Pyrenees tend to be very accepting of random canines that come through. Um, so those are probably, those are your like the tendencies of your top four breeds. Those kind of three, I don't want to call them minor breeds, but they're, you know, lesser known, like your Kangles, your Crocochans, your Commodores. Um, Kangles tend to be very canine aggressive. Again, tend to like large territories, tend to be on the perimeter. Your Crocochans tend to be a close proximity dog again, and so are the Commodores. Uh, so, if producers are looking, if you're a small producer or you're looking for a dog to stay with your stock, check out your Maremas, your Crocochans, your Commodores. Again, floaters are the Akbash, and your perimeter dogs are your Anatolian Shepherds and your Great Pyrenees.
So if you have a property that is of smaller size, selecting a livestock guardian dog that is more of a close proximity dog would be probably more beneficial because the other
Yes.
ones may have a tendency to potentially roam past your fence line maybe a little bit.
Yes. Probably your neighbor's fence line and probably your neighbor's fence line as well. And so, your Anatolian, your Great Pyrenees is probably going to, if you're a smaller producer, it could be guarding, all the people within a mile or two of
Yeah.
your property. Which on a big ranch isn't a big deal. I
Right.
mean, like if you got 60,000 acres, because I work with producers that have that size ranch and 20 dogs or whatever, having dogs that, patrol a square mile is not a big deal at all. Um, but that's an issue, if you've got 50 or 100 acres, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah. So is there like an ideal herd size? Obviously, I'm assuming depending upon the breed, they probably, I'll say, prefer certain herd, a smaller or larger herd size, but is there kind of like a general rule of thumb of if you have X number of livestock, you should have, one livestock guardian dog per X number of livestock?
Sure. So kind of the general, and this has been kind of a long time rule. The general rule of thumb, if you've got like kind of the average operation, so, you've got some brush in your pastures and you have pretty good fencing and you've got just kind of an average load of predators. You've got some bobcats and some coyotes, but nothing super crazy. That kind of the average rule of thumb is 1 to 2 dogs per 100 head. Now, that is definitely just an average. There's times when I talk to producers who, they can't see 20 feet in their pasture because the brush is so bad and fencing is barely there or non-existent. They're overrun with bobcats and coyotes and feral hogs and, aerial predators and everything. Then I might recommend, 1 to 2 dogs per 50 head. So it just kind of really does depend, on the situation. But a good place to start is 1 to 2 per 100 head, and then kind of go from there because you can have too many dogs. And so this is a mistake that a producer I was working with who got some dogs from us. He had never had guard dogs before. He got 3 dogs from us and like they were just doing great. And he was like, okay, like I'm going to go out and get more dogs. And I was like, look, you just need to go slow, let these dogs you got from me fully mature, and then, get a couple of new puppies and I'll help you go through the bonding process. Well, he went out and bought like 6 guard dog puppies that were all 6 to 8 months old. And yeah, it was a train wreck because they were all going through adolescence at the same time. Some were chasing, some were chewing off ears, tails, some were digging out. And like, yeah, it was a big mess. And I mean, I worked through it with him, but he definitely didn't do that again.
Yeah.
Um,
Curious
and
about
and
that. So like if you want to get more, that's a good point. Like so do you need to wait until your current dogs are fully mature and then you get puppies? Is that the how
yeah,
that works or
so our recommendation, and I know not everybody can do this, but our general recommendation is to get weaned puppies. So get 8-week-old pups, bond them and train them yourself. Go through the process. Once those dogs are at least 18 months old, then get your next set of puppies for a
Mm,
couple reasons. One, as I mentioned, they're not all going through the teenage months at the same time. And that's another spot where producers have a ton of issues with guard dogs. So get them to hopefully be fairly mature and to kind of have settled down for you, and then get another set of dogs again. And for a couple of reasons, like I said, one, you know, they're not all going through adolescence at the same time. And two, as you need to replace those dogs, your age is staggered then. And so, you don't need to replace, for instance, 5 dogs all at once. You can replace 1 or 2 dogs this year, and then the next year you can replace a couple more dogs and kind of so on and so forth as you go through the process and, you kind of develop a dog program in your operation.
So, hmm. So you'd kind of mentioned that whenever you first getting the dogs, like, obviously nothing fancy in regards to I'll say tricks or commands, very, very basic commands.
Yep.
But what are some other basic care things that you should teach your dog, the livestock guardian dog, or some basic care that you should provide for these guys? Because obviously they're providing you a service. They are protecting your livestock. So what should people know in regards to caring for them properly?
Sure. Well, all of our puppies, if somebody gets a dog from us, they all have a name. They should know three basic commands of no, stay, and come. Um, they should be able to walk on a leash. Now, I mean, they're not going to walk like a, you know,
They may
some
not have
sort of
the
a pet, but they
yeah.
won't pull you over. They'll walk on a leash for you. Um, they'll lay down and be tethered for a fairly long period of time. They'll be able to ride in a vehicle or in a trailer and not get all anxious and puking and slobbering and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. Um, so those are all things that we do, with our pups. Um, as far as other things that we do, one, I strongly encourage producers to socialize your dogs well. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to socialize a guard dog. You should not have to round up all your animals to catch your guard dog because it got gored by a pig or is full of porcupine quills or something like that. You should be able to catch your guard dog out in the pasture easily. So how long does that take? We spend 15 to 20 minutes per puppy 3 to 4 times a week. If you do that, and during that process, we're tethering them, we're leash training them, we're actually like petting them, grooming the long-haired dogs. Um, some other things that we do kind of during that socialization time when we go out and work with the dogs is, we check their teeth, puppy teeth, baby teeth. And so they lose those teeth at some point. Those teeth can get, like an abscess. So we spend some time opening their mouth, running our fingers around, making sure one, they have a good bite development, that their jaws are coming together correctly, that they don't have a stick stuck in there because they're chewing on it or something, so they can't eat, and that they don't have any abscess teeth coming in or out. Another thing is spend some time manipulating each one of your puppy's toes. Some of your breeds, like like Great Pyrenees, have double rear dew claws.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a breed characteristic that those dogs have, and so those nails don't wear down though, and so you have to go in and trim those. Well, if that dog is not used to you handling their feet from the puppy time, it can be very difficult, and you can get bit. Grabbing a Pyrenees back foot and trying to clip the toes, especially if you nip the quick on there and they bleed some. That's painful to them. So, we spend time doing that kind of stuff with those puppies during that kind of socialization time. Um, so, like I said, 15 to 20 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week really isn't a lot of time to train and like socialize your guard dog puppy. Now, you do have to continue that through adulthood. So you can't just, do it while they're in the bonding pen and then never, catch them or put them on a leash or something again. You have to continue that. But like I said, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you will see a lot of benefits, in handling and catching your dogs and stuff to do those things. Um, one thing you mentioned as far as care and stuff, um, we like all of our dogs to go into a feeding station because our research ranches are just like a regular producer's ranch. Like we don't have a whole lot of help, so our dogs go into self feeders, and they monitor their own feed intake and stuff like that. If you can hand feed, that's ideal, but a lot of producers can't do that, especially larger producers. They just don't have the manpower and time to go feed all the dogs. Um, Going along with that is guard dogs travel, I would say, like on a 5,000 acre ranch. We did a study, we pulled a bunch of the GPS tracker data, and there were, I think, 7 dogs over 18 months. And on average, those dogs traveled 7 miles a day.
Oh, wow.
On another project that I'm doing right now, there were 5 different ranches, range from 2,000 to 10,000 acres, and those dogs traveled on average 11 miles a day. So, the reason I bring that up is guard dogs need a good quality dog food. Okay, so producers don't go down to Walmart and buy a pallet of Old Roy because it's not a good quality food. Well, yes, it's cheap. You get what you pay for, and your dog is going to get the same. And so when you don't feed a good quality kibble, they're going to be laying around a lot more. They're not going to be keeping up with the herd because they don't have the energy to do that.
I mean, they're basically an athlete is what they are. They are an
Yes.
athlete, and they are a working dog that has a working dog needs.
Yes. And so, I'm not saying to go and buy $100 bag of Purina Pro Plan, but feed a good quality middle of the road feed, something like Diamond or Victor. Those are both good brands of dog food and ones that I would recommend, producers feed their guard dogs. They will see a difference in just the overall dog's body condition staying where it should be, and, the dogs being more active in the field for them year round.
Very
And
nice.
I have a question about feeding them too. So you said that they can travel, you mentioned 7 miles, one was 11 miles a day. Are they coming back every day to eat, or do they skip meals, or how does that work for them?
So, generally, our recommendation is wherever a producer has, water for stock to have a feeding station for their dogs. If they're self-feeding. So, for instance, if you've got a section-sized pasture and you've got 3 water troughs there, or a tank or a pond or something, have a feeding station at each one so that when the livestock go to water, the dog can get feed as well. Because otherwise, exactly what you mentioned, Carly, if you've got a bunch of rocky areas, for instance, and you get some rain, the livestock are probably not going to go to the trough to drink. They're going to drink from those little pools in the rock. And so the dog is probably not going to leave the livestock because or they should be well bonded to the animals. They don't want to leave even to go eat. And just a quick story, we actually had that happen on one of our research ranches. And we had a dog get extremely thin because he wasn't leaving because the goats were drinking out of all the, little pools in all the rock and, eating grass and shrubs and such. And so, yeah, I mean, we almost lost a dog because he wouldn't leave the animals to go eat.
Oh, wow. That's
Probably seems like it was a good dog though, if it
Yes, I
was,
mean he was a phenomenal dog. Not very socialized, but
yeah.
he was a good dog. And so yeah, it's important to have feeding stations, spread out for your dog so they can go in and get food when they need it. Because yeah, I mean, and the other thing is you really don't want them leaving the livestock to go, find food somewhere because then your animals are unprotected now.
Hmm. Well, it's the 1 o'clock hour. I know I keep saying this. We could go on for like another like 30 minutes on this very, very easily, but it sounds like you have a bunch of really great resources on y'all's website. Like I said, we'll link that down below so y'all can go find that. I know Bill travels around to do programs all the time, so I'm sure if you're interested, you can probably reach out to Bill. He'll get back with you as soon as he can.
Yep, happy to.
Having to take care of all the dogs and do the research. So he'll get back with you when he can, or talk to your county extension agent. I'm sure he'd be happy to come out and talk with y'all for a program. But Bill, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Sure, very
I
happy
know
to.
I definitely learned a lot. I wish I had some livestock so I could have a livestock guardian dog, but we're not there yet. So when that day comes, I know who to call.
Yep, feel free to give me a call. I guess the only one quick thing I want to throw out there is we do have a Facebook, Instagram, and a YouTube channel. Folks really like my videos are just very down to earth, folks. Like they're not like some professional thing. So don't expect something fancy, but there's good content in it for you. And a lot of people seem to like the videos that we have on YouTube. So check those out as well.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Yeah, go check that out, YouTube, Facebook. But yeah, hope everyone has an absolutely fantastic rest of their afternoon. And we will see y'all next week. Bye.
Sounds good. See you later, everybody.